Well, it seems inevitable that at the end of February and beginning of March, we here in Sacramento start paying a lot more attention to college basketball in the upcoming draft class. We wish it wasn't that way, but hey, such is life here as a Sacramento Kings fan. And even though the Kings are still very much in the mix for the play in, many fans are debating whether or not it's in the best interest of the Kings to go for the play in and try and win now versus put themselves in a position for the best draft lottery odds. And in order to answer that question or have a better idea of that debate and that argument, we need to have a good idea of this upcoming draft class. So on today's Locked On Kings podcast, I'm going to be joined by Locked On NBA draft host and overall just draft junkie, draft mind, Rafael Barlowe. He's joined me a number of times on Locked On Kings in the past. He's going to give us an idea of this draft class, tell us about the guys at the top of the draft, or the late lottery range if the Kings end up in that spot, what kind of talent is available there. And Rafael, I think, is going to have an interesting question, or rather interesting answer to the question of whether or not the Kings should try and win now or end up tanking for a draft pick. It's all on today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off season. If you're looking for in-depth analysis, game-by-game breakdowns, highlights, interviews with local and national experts, full coverage of your Sacramento Kings from January through December, this is the place for you, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them Locked On sent you. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. This is my 8th season covering Kings basketball, now with ABC 10 News and Television here in the California capital. But for many years that I've hosted here on the Locked On Kings podcast, I've known and been aware of the work of Rafael Barlowe. I've had him on the Locked On Kings podcast a number of times. One of my absolute favorite draft minds out there. And it seems like I'm talking to him earlier and earlier every single year. But I wanted to make sure to get him on here during the season before March Madness started to give us an idea of what players in March Madness to actually pay attention to and also help the debate that's really going on right now between Kings fans. Even after the Domantas Sabonis trade, there are a lot of fans that do believe that it's in the best interest for the Kings to lose right now and get better draft lottery odds than it would be for them to win right now and make the play-in and have a chance of ending that playoff drought. So Rafael is going to have his opinion on that and share his opinion on that. He's going to share a lot of information about this draft class, specific players and their fits with the Sacramento Kings. This is a great conversation. I absolutely love having Rafael on, and I think you will too. So here you are, some NBA Draft 2022 draft class previews and early coverage here on the Locked On Kings podcast. I've been promising you an NBA 2022 draft class preview for a while now. And even if we didn't want to have to talk about the draft too much here in Sacramento this season, lo and behold, even with the Kings still in the play-in and playoff race loosely in the Western Conference, the Kings are also currently at the best odds at a top 6 pick in this upcoming draft. And to help tell us a little bit more about this draft, to preview this draft class for us, give us an idea of what kind of players are available, how good this draft class potentially is my guy, Rafael Barlowe. It has been too long since Rafael has joined me here on Locked On Kings. And Rafael, his resume speaks for itself. The founder of NBADraftJunkies.com, one of the hosts of the Locked On NBA Draft podcast. And now, if I'm not mistaken, Rafael, the new director of scouting for Chad Ford's NBA Big Board. And you're currently international right now, Rafael, joining me here on Locked On Kings. Where are you at, my guy? What are you doing? And welcome back in.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I think the last time we did this was Summer League. I was coming in like right after watching the King Summer League games. But right now I am in Belgrade, Serbia. I'm here for, they call it the Adidas Next Generation Tournament. And it's a pretty big tournament where you have clubs, like some of the top clubs in Europe that have like their younger teams compete for a championship. So this is a big scouting event for me, something I've been looking forward to all season.
Well, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you after a very, very chaotic and busy travel day that you were telling me about. You joining me here on Locked On Kings. I really appreciate that. Let's just jump right in, my man. How would you summarize this 2022 draft class? Is it a great class, a good class, bang average, below average? Like, where would you put this draft class compared to like recent classes?
I'm one of these people that don't like to judge a draft class before they actually drafted. I think you don't really know how good a draft class is until, 2 or 3 years down the line. I think the 2020 class, a lot of people thought that was a weak class. And I think it was labeled a weak class because some of the top players didn't go to like the blue blood schools. So, LaMelo was in Australia. Anthony Edwards was in Georgia, which is not like, he wasn't at like Kentucky or Kansas or anything like that. You didn't get a chance to see him a lot on TV. And I mean, LaMelo's an all-star already. Anthony Edwards is definitely going to be an all-star. And you got two franchise guys in that particular draft when everyone thought it was a weak class. So I think this class it has 3 guys that I think are tier 1, but I think overall it's a pretty strong class. But again, I probably would never call a class weak because, you just don't know. I mean, I want to say, what was it? The class with 2019, everybody thought that was super strong with Zion and RJ Barrett. And I mean, Ja's been great. Ja's the best player in that class right now.
I'm going to detour this already because you brought up the 2020 class and how everybody thought that was a weak class. And the 12th overall pick in that class was Tyrese Halliburton that the Kings just traded to Indiana for 2-time All-Star Domantas Sabonis. What are your thoughts on that move? Your overall thoughts on Tyrese, the player that he is going to be? Do you think the Kings made a mistake giving up on him, or not necessarily giving up on him, trading him away for a player that is better than him right now, but who knows a couple of years down the line?
I honestly would have did it. I mean, I know Tyrese is a fan favorite. I think that, Sabonis is young. If I'm not mistaken, he's only like
25.
Yep. Yeah. It seems like he's been in the league for about 9 years now, but he's still young. And technically, if you say your prime starts at 26 through 30 or, everybody has a different range, but I think that Sabonis is really good. I think De'Aaron Fox is the better talent. I don't think that Fox played up to his potential with Halliburton sharing ball handling duties. So I think in the second half of the season, you're going to see the same De'Aaron Fox that, I don't think too many people questioned when he got the big contract. And I just think that, Fox has a higher upside as far as being an engine, while I think that Halliburton is a very, very good complementary player.
All right, so let's get back to this 2022 draft class. Could you tell us a little bit about the top of this class? You mentioned a top 3 heavy class, and if these are names potentially that not necessarily recommend the Sacramento Kings, but any team to tank hard for or wish hard for or cross their fingers for. We're talking franchise-altering talent at the top of this class, at least in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 3, possibly 4. I'd start off with Chet Holmgren from Gonzaga, 7 foot, 195 pounds, so he's skinny. I mean, he can do hula hoops and a Cheerio, but he's tough, skilled. I mean, he's been labeled a unicorn, but we're talking about a 7-footer that shoots the ball well. Last time I looked, I mean, I've been traveling a little bit, but as of a few days ago, he was shooting 46% from 3, excellent rim protector, can handle the ball. I mean, there may be some concerns about him being so thin, and I mean, really, there's not anybody to really compare him to. And so the most obvious comparison that people are making is Porzingis, because Porzingis was 7'4" and can shoot, and then Porzingis has had some injury issues. But I mean, I think Chet could be a franchise guy. You got Jabari Smith, who is the son of a former Kings player, Jabari Smith Sr. Mm-hmm. He's 6'10", excellent shooter. I mean, I think over his last 2 games, he's made 11 out of his last 15 threes. He's the younger of the 3 tier 1 guys that I have. He's only 18 years old. I think he may just be turning 19 on draft day. I see him as this inside outside threat. Once he gets stronger, I think he's going to be a really good post player because he has the touch. And I think that actually between Chet, Jabari, and Paolo Banchero, who is another guy that I have in my tier one, I think they all fit well with Sacramento, and they all complement Fox and Sabonis with Chet and Jabari. They are comfortable spacing the floor, and they're also plus defenders. And then with Banchero, that would be interesting because I think that he's the most NBA ready of the guys now, but I really like him as a secondary playmaker. So if you get Fox, Banchero, and Sabonis, I think a creative coach can just come up with all types of crazy lineups because Banchero at 6'10", he's 6'10", 250, but he's comfortable running the offense. I mean, he's a good ball handler. You can put him in ball screens. He can make plays for others. He can be a guy that you run a pick and roll for. If he gets the ball in the middle of the floor, he can swing the ball. Kind of like the role Draymond Green played in a sense with the Warriors. He can, throw the lob or kick it out to the shooters. But Banchero is also wired to score. So, I mean, I've seen people compare him to like Carmelo because of his ability to score off the dribble. I've seen some people compare him to like Julius Randle in a sense, as far as just being a big that can handle the ball and make plays. So, I mean, I think either three of those guys would be a good fit. The other guy that I kind of borderline by being in my tier one is Jaden Ivy. And I don't think he'd be the best fit in Sacramento because I think that'll be like the fourth guard in a row. So I think it would be redundant to what they already had, but he's a dynamic athlete. He's not the passer of Ja Morant, but as far as like that type of energy, burst, athleticism, and just the intangibles of competing hard every night, he is that guy. So I'd say right now there's three tier one guys, maybe a fourth.
I'm really glad you brought up fit with Fox and Sabonis, because the Kings have drafted a lot for fit in the past, and it's gotten them into trouble. But like you mentioned, the Kings, their last two draft picks have been guards when De'Aaron Fox is already here. Now, thankfully, one of them turned into Domantas Sabonis in the trade and Tyrese Halliburton. But really, the Kings are looking not just at the draft, but they're looking at this offseason as finding assets that can fill the gaps between Fox and Sabonis, essentially finding players, especially wings, 3-and-D type players that help space the floor, can knock down the outside shot, and give the Kings a pulse on the defensive end, which they haven't had for quite some time. The three names that you mentioned in the top three, I absolutely agree with you. They fit that role, or fit that slot, that wing spot that the Kings are going to have open, with the exception of Harrison Barnes, who may even be on the move this offseason. But about that 3-and-D role in particular, do you think this is a pretty good draft class for what the Kings need and are going to be looking for this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few names like Arizona's Benedict Mathurin, I think, is a plug and play guy. It's weird because before the Halliburton trade, at least in my opinion, I feel like Sacramento had shooters. It's with Hield and Halliburton. I mean, those are two guys that you can't leave open. Now they really need some outside shooting. And then I think, just balancing out the roster is going to be key for Sacramento. Coming into the season, it seemed like you had too many point guards and too many centers and not enough wings. And so I think you should be able to find at least a wing in the draft.
Today's episode of Locked On Kings is brought to you by Truebill. This is an absolute must-have app here in 2022. Do you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's a business scam to get your money out of you without you even really noticing. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill.com, or rather download Truebill, the app, to take control of your subscriptions. Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions that you don't need, want, or you simply forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 a year on Truebill. No, that's not a made-up number. It's really that much because companies companies make subscriptions hard to cancel, Truebill is the opposite. They make it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. It's like turning off or on a setting on your phone. It's that simple. Truebill has over 2 million users and has helped save them over $100 million. Don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/lockedonnba. Go right now, truebill.com/lockedonnba. It could save you thousands of dollars a year. Locked On Kings is also brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models of cars, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. Why would you endure pointless or sometimes intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts that only their warehouse happens to carry, their brands at their price points? You have computers or phones with access to rockauto.com. Use that and save yourself money. You'll spend 30, 50, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership. At Rock Auto, you save that money and you save time. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you could need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. You can explore their easy-to-use website right now to find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. What about outside of those top 3, fringe top 4, like you were saying? Like, we're talking mid to late lottery range for talent, because the Kings, as of right now, as it stands, they're sitting with the best odds at the 6th pick here at the time of this recording on February 24th. In my mind, the Kings are going to be going for the play-in and going for the playoffs. And let's say best case scenario happens, the Kings make the play-in itself and boot out the Portland Trailblazers, beat out both the Pelicans and the San Antonio Spurs, and get that 10th spot. The Portland Trailblazers right now are currently tied for the 9th pick with New York. So let's just say that's pick 10. So let's say the Kings drop from 6 to pick 10, and we're feeling pretty good about them winning games, but ultimately draft lottery wise, they get worse. In terms of that kind of like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 type range, how do you evaluate that talent and the potential for the Kings to get not necessarily a game changer, but someone who's going to help this team make the playoffs as early as the very next season?
That's tough. That's really tough. I think like Benedict Mathurin is the best plug and play option there. He's someone that doesn't necessarily need the ball, but he's a pretty good shooter. He's athletic and he can defend. AJ Griffin might be in that range, 6'6", about 220 pounds, from Duke. He's drawn a lot of comparisons to Jimmy Butler, and he could be a top 5 pick, but there's some concerns about his injury history, so he could fall into that range. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, there's like Kendall Brown from Baylor, who is like a elite athlete, is a ball mover, but he's a very reluctant shooter, someone that just does not like to shoot, but he is a complimentary piece. I'm trying to think. I mean, right now, I don't think there's anybody that would be in that range that would be able to come in. Maybe Ochai Agbaji from Kansas. He's 6'5". He's a senior. And I mean, he's done everything that you want out of a senior. He's gotten better every year. He's shooting like 44% from 3 on a good level, on a good number of attempts, averaging 20 points a game. Because he's a senior, he may not be the sexiest pick because people may not think that he has the same upside. But I think now he would be somebody that I think that can come in and be a plug and play guy. He could actually be like this year's Desmond Bane, how Bane fell in the draft because he was a senior and people thought like, oh, he doesn't have the greatest upside. And now he's playing an important role for the Grizzlies. So Agbaji would be somebody who I think could possibly be in that range. But I think that's a little high for him, even though ESPN has him mocked in the back end of the lottery in their last mock draft.
For your mock drafts and your boards specifically, do they change and fluctuate a lot between now and post March Madness? Does March Madness have a massive effect on your board as it might have on other boards? Or do you think there's a lot of value in what players are doing right now before that massive stage?
Sometimes I struggle with that. And I guess the biggest example was I was never like this big Jabari Parker fan. throughout that year. I think it was 2014, and he had just an awful tournament. But a lot of people said that it doesn't matter, and I mean, he's out of the league right now.
It mattered.
26. But I think that's just more so like his style of play and his fit and just not adapting to change. But that was someone who I thought, the tournament showed some things there. And then there's somebody else I can't think of that had a really bad tournament game and they've turned out to be really good. But for me, the draft and my mock draft or big boards, I mean, they fluctuate throughout the week. Mm-hmm. So just the human nature in me, it's going to change some. But then, sometimes, the last impression is what you have of a guy. So if a guy goes 1 for 11, that's your last impression, especially if it's against a good team and you're like, well, see, that's how he's going to struggle against great athletes. And then if a guy has a great game, it's hard not to forget about like how great he looked in his last game. So to answer your question, it's going to fluctuate regardless. I mean, my mock draft today is probably different than my mock draft last week. So it will change.
So I would love to get your insight on what you think would be a more optimal route for the Kings. Of course, you have more of a draft focus than you do an NBA playoff or postseason focus. But of course, you're a fan of the NBA. You know that that's ultimately the goal for these teams. And the Kings are trying to avoid a NBA record playoff drought. But at the same time, they have a long way to go. Like they're 3.5 games back with 22 games remaining of that final playoff, or rather play-in spot. And then they have to win 2 in a row, basically single elimination games to get to the playoffs from that point. That's a steep hill to climb. And I've basically called the play-in tournament a sexy way of glossing up, like putting lipstick on a pig, essentially for NBA purgatory. Like if you're a play-in team, but you don't make the playoffs, you're kind of stuck because you're not in the playoffs and you didn't get as good of a draft pick as you could have had. And that's a position that the Kings have been in far too many times over the course of this playoff drought. At the same time, though, you got De'Aaron Fox and you have Domantas Sabonis now. It's a completely different core, completely different duo than you've had at any point this season, at any point in Fox's career, really. So you might want to maximize the time that those two have, get them off to a head start. If they start playing and have success and the Kings start winning games because of the two of them, I have a hard time seeing that that's a bad thing. But where would you be, and where do you think you are with that? Like, you think it would be in the best effort of the Kings or intent of the Kings right now because Fox and Sabonis are their core to try and win as many games as possible? Or do you think this draft class is appealing enough and has enough that should interest the Kings to where they shouldn't mind losing right now and could even sacrifice some Fox and Sabonis playing time in order to accomplish that?
I'd shoot for the playoffs, to be honest with you. I mean, I think that unless they were going to get a top 4 pick, then I think it's pretty fluid between 5 and 12. I don't think there's that much of a difference. But I would shoot for the playoffs. I mean, I think it sends a message, even though I understand that, there's benefits to tanking. I just don't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like seeing teams not compete. I don't like seeing veterans that want to play not playing because they may help the team win. I think that just kind of sends a bad message. But, my what I chose to make a career in is focusing on the draft and there's a reward for being bad, which is getting a better draft pick. But to answer your question, I would try to compete. I think it sends a good message to your players, to Sabonis and even Fox, like, hey, we brought you in here to win. And, we think that you guys are the cornerstones and we can get a complimentary piece in the draft or whatever. So I would try to win.
Rafael, this is super hypothetical, so there is no right answer to this, and it might even be impossible for you to answer, but I'm going to do my best here. trade value of a draft pick, of a lottery pick in this year's draft, especially in the Kings range. Like I've said already, and we've heard conversation already, that the Kings, I mean, they did a good job managing to trade for Domantas Sabonis without giving up any draft compensation, even if it did cost them Tyrese Halliburton. It wouldn't surprise any of us here in Sacramento if the Kings try to move this year's draft pick, especially if they're partnering it with maybe Harrison Barnes, maybe a Rashawn Holmes, to try and get solid pieces, solid veteran pieces, or already proven NBA talent to plug in with Fox and Sabonis. At the same time, too, maybe the Kings try and use this year's pick and one of those players that I mentioned, maybe even a Davion Mitchell or something, if they really like a guy and try and move up in the draft. In your mind, I mean, every single year, draft picks have seemingly more value before a pick is made than after a pick is made, when there's an actual player name attached to that pick. But what do you think about the potential strategy of the Kings trying to use this pick in trade scenarios to bolster themselves and prepare themselves for a playoff push?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think if you end up with a top 8 to 10 pick, I think that would be enough to get Jeremy Grant in Sacramento. And I mean, he would be helpful. You'd have I don't want to call it a big three, but you have, 3 guys, and maybe you could even keep Barnes. I don't know what the numbers look like off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, I think even may not be the best fit, but I wouldn't be shocked to see the Knicks look to trade. I mean, I think they would trade Julius Randle for a lottery pick. And so that's a fairly good option for them there. And I mean, I like Harrison Barnes. I think that he should be playing the 4. And I think that he's just a solid player, great locker room guy, great veteran. And, I think sometimes if you have way too many young guys and not enough vets, that could, that doesn't help you out. But to answer your question, I do think there's some value in trading a pick.
Locked On Kings brought to you by our friends at Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. We're at the end of February, and I know some of you have those New Year's resolutions still going strong. Good for you, but the vast majority of us, those resolutions have already fallen off a little bit, but there's still time to pick it back up, especially if those resolutions have to do with eating healthier, feeling overall healthier, getting to the gym more. Built Bar can help with all these resolutions, can really help you get back on track without making it feel like a massive lifestyle change. Look, I have a sweet tooth. We all have a sweet tooth. We all love our candy bars and our treats, and we don't want to have to give those up in order to feel better or look better or just get in shape and lose weight. Thankfully, you don't have to now because of Built Bar. They're protein bars that taste like candy bars. They're covered in 100% chocolate, but the difference in calories is the big thing here. Candy bars on average, 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, dozens of net carbs. For Built Bars, 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and importantly, 17 grams of protein. Plus, it's a wide variety of flavors for you to try. Like my favorite is mint brownie because it tastes like mint chocolate chip ice cream, which is one of my absolute favorite treats. There's like for you fruit bar and fruit candy lovers and things like that. There's fruit flavors of Built Bar for those chocoholics out there. There are many different chocolate hearty flavors for you to try. You need to make sure you're giving Built Bar a chance, and you'll see both results in your New Year's resolution. Plus, you'll overall be happy with just the taste and the freedom that Built Bar provides. If you go to Built.com right now, you can order a mixed box to try a bunch of different flavors or build your own custom box if you know your favorite flavors. And when you do order each box, make sure you use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. The one thing, well, there's many things that Vlade Divac left us with in his time as a general manager, but one of the major things he left the Kings with and this current regime with is an abundance of second round picks. Projecting the second round, I have no idea how easy or difficult that is for you. I'm not even going to try and even do it. But looking at the second round or even like the late first round, are we talking about like at best G League talent that you might take a flyer on that maybe turns into something? Are we talking about diamonds in the rough that years from now it's like, oh wow, that guy fell that far? How in the world? Like, what do you think about kind of the bottom of this draft, the second round and late first round of this class?
You know what? That's actually the part of the draft that I'm most excited about, simply because there's probably like 5 guys who were projected as lottery picks coming into the season. And for whatever reasons, they have not had the best years, and they've they will probably be available late first round, early second round. And I think those are some guys that maybe they were in a bad situation. And I think they have a great potential to being able to outperform their draft, their draft position. You got guys like, I'll throw some names out there: Caleb Houston from Michigan, Ousmane Dieng, who's playing in Australia. You got Max Christie at Michigan State. You got Peyton Watson, a Long Beach kid who many thought was going to be a top 10 pick. And with Johnny Juzang coming back to UCLA, kind of left him as the odd man out, with UCLA having two guys that play the same position that were on a Final Four team last year, and our NBA draft prospects in their own right. So I think that the second round is going to be good. I would say maybe between picks 15 through 35. I don't think there's that much of a difference. It's just going to be, a preference. But then on the other hand, I thought the Kings had two good second rounders, I think, in 2020, and they just released both of them. Mm-hmm. So that's also something that I have to take in consideration also.
Yeah, and hopefully Neemias Queta, who we talked a lot about on draft night and during the summer, he still has the potential to turn into something. He's one of the Kings' two-way players right now, and we don't know if there's a future for him with Sacramento. I got two more questions for you, Rafael. One has absolutely nothing to do with the Kings, and I'll get to that in just a second. But in terms of, I don't know if this is kind of your style to call young men who have their have dreams and aspirations of making the NBA, call them like red flag players or anything like that. But are there any players that give you kind of spark a warning bell for you, or just, hey, you have concerns about in this draft class, whether they're high in the lottery or wherever, that you would just recommend, hey, the Kings or any team, I would tend to kind of avoid that player?
Maybe not necessarily avoid, but there are some guys that I think have some red flags. And I actually posed the question on my Twitter page, and I had the Kings in mind. So, for example, there's AJ Griffin from Duke, who was a projected top 6 or 7 pick coming into the season. He had some injury issues in high school, and then I think I forgot what he did, but he had an injury. I think he suffered early in the season, and before the season actually, in practice. And Duke brought him along slowly. The last few weeks, he's shown that he was worthy of being projected and ranked that high. But there's some concerns because he missed a part of this season and he missed a part of his high school season. So his medicals are going to be very big in determining where he gets drafted at. And then there's Shaden Sharp, who was the number 1 high school recruit in the country. Somehow, some way, he managed to have enough credits before the start of the NBA basketball season, which makes him eligible, at least as of today. We think that he's eligible for the 2022 NBA draft, even though he was projected as a top 3 pick in 2023. So if he becomes available, if you're like the Kings, do you take a gamble? And I just made a post. It was on NBA Big Board today, and I did an article, and it's actually free, so it's not behind a paywall. But I labeled him the biggest wild card in this draft class because I don't think a lot of NBA scouts have seen him play, because he was in high school last year and he had a big summer, kind of came out of nowhere. And I think he was maybe a top 100 recruit before last summer, and then finished the summer as the number 1 recruit in the nation. And he hasn't played a college game. So if you're the Kings, or any team, are you willing to take a risk on a guy that has tremendous talent? I mean, he's 6'6", he's a shot creator, he's super athletic, but you have not seen him play a college game. And right now he's enrolled at Kentucky and he's just practicing with the team. So it's like a red flag in a sense, because you're not getting a chance to fully evaluate him, but he does have can't miss potential. So I think it's somewhat of a red flag that he's not playing. But do you want to miss out on a guy that, was the number 1 player in his class? And then on the flip side of that, you had guys, like I mentioned earlier, were top 5 prospects that I think could fall into the second round because they actually did play. So those would be the 2 biggest red flags in my opinion.
All right, I found a way to make this last question somehow about the Sacramento Kings. So
we're running out of time. I'm enjoying it.
I know. I got a time limit. Got to get this all in. I could talk to you for hours, but I want to make sure that I get this in, because I'm looking at conveyed draft picks, right? And we know the Oklahoma City Thunder have a boatload of picks over the next forever, but they have 3 draft picks, I believe, in this year's lottery. And as of right now, the best odds of the 4th overall pick, 3 games back of the Rockets at the 3rd. And speaking of the Rockets, I believe, have a pair of picks in this year's, or first round picks in this year's draft. San Antonio, I think, has 3 picks in the first round of this draft. And these are all teams that are right in the same boat or right around the same area in the Western Conference standings as the Kings are right now. And these are teams that the Kings, I think, are going to be competing with next season to try and vault themselves into the playoff conversation, not to mention the teams that are already in the playoffs that are going to be holding on to that position. Which of those teams, if any, in your mind, has the most potential to really change themselves almost overnight through the draft? And is that even fair to expect any draft class to potentially change one of these teams with multiple shots at it overnight?
Well, this is similar to your question, but it's a little bit different. I think the team that has the potential, and it's actually kind of scary, is the Memphis Grizzlies, because they have 3 first-round picks, and one of them is the Lakers pick.
I didn't even mention them. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so one of them is the Lakers pick, which is projected at number 11 right now. So they're in position to trade 3 first-round picks for a really good player.
Yes.
So that's scary. If you would have asked me a year ago, I would have said the Atlanta Hawks were in the best position to add a really good player, because I thought that they had a lot of talent. Then they had 2 guys last year that many thought were first round picks that they were able to get really late in the draft. But I mean, with Memphis right now, this way it's gone, they'd have pick 11, 25, 28. Yeah, 3 first round picks. So, I mean, there's some team that is looking to dump a high earning, high level starter to restart. But yeah, I mean, as far as your actual question, I'd say San Antonio. I mean, I just think the Rockets are a mess, to be honest with you. I mean, I just think that they are in a bad position. I think John Wall could have helped them win, but they want to lose. I'm not saying John Wall was going to even get them to the playoffs, but just turning the franchise over to Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green, I just think that as of right now, it just looks bad. Like they're just out there hooping. and I like Coach Silas. I really like him a lot. I just think that he has been dealt a crazy situation, because it just seems like the Rockets' whole goal for the season was to make Jalen Green the franchise guy to replace James Harden. And according to one of the metrics, he's the worst player in the NBA. Not saying that those metrics are always right, because Darius Garland was the worst player a couple of years ago. But I would go with San Antonio. I mean, I just think they have more stability. You got Pop, and they already have DeJounte Murray, who's an all-star. And I think with the 8th pick, I mean, at least where they're projected at 8th pick, they should be able to get a pretty good player. And then they have a track record of getting guys to outperform where they were drafted at, whether it's Tony Parker, whether it's Manu Ginobili, whether it's Kawhi Leonard. And, I don't know if they can strike gold 4 times in a row, but I would say San Antonio, just because of their track record and more stability in the franchise.
All right, I got another one for you. You all right with that?
Yeah.
All right, so you can be honest with this, be completely honest with this, even if you're worried about pissing off Kings fans, it's totally okay. Is there a team that, based off of this draft class and the top of this draft, and in terms of just like fantasy fit, is there a team that you most would like to see get number 1 overall? Like if it's Orlando or Detroit or really anybody, like you just said, this team, I would love to see them get number 1 overall because this player would be a great fit there. Or I just want to see it. Is there any team that jumps to your mind there?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up a Blazers fan.
Okay.
And maybe rewarding Dame for his loyalty. I mean, everything he said is loyalty, I mean, he hasn't forced his way out, which we're starting to see a lot of that. But I mean, honestly, I would like to see the Kings just, get lucky, I mean, it seems like they've always been 1 pick away, and I mean, outside of Bagley, I guess you can say they were 1 pick away there. But I mean, yeah, I think it would really, really shake the draft up if the Kings were to get one of these picks, because I feel like they already have two of their cornerstones in place right now. So adding a third could literally just make them jump from, a team that's fighting for the play-in spot, and you get one of these rookies that has a Evan Mobley type impact. And now you're talking about the Kings being the Cleveland Cavaliers of next season. I know that's best case scenario, but I mean, who would have thought the Cleveland Cavaliers would have 3 All-Stars at this time last year?
Well,
two All-Stars.
Right.
I'm sorry.
I know it wasn't this current front office regime's fault, but it feels like the Kings kind of wasted their luck in moving up to 5 to get Fox, and then moving up to 2 and then picking Bagley. Not that Fox has been the wrong pick by any means, but that number 2 pick will forever haunt the Kings. And at least that saga's over now with Bagley in Detroit. But that might have been the Kings wasting their massive draft lottery luck. But who knows? We'll see how things end up. And Rafael, as we get closer to the draft itself, we're definitely having you back on, because I'm sure things will get more context. We'll have the March Madness context. We'll get an actual idea of where the Kings pick is going to be. I can't wait to have you back on, my friend, to discuss that more, and enjoy your travels as much as possible. Enjoy your scouting, and make sure you get back to the States safe, but have a great time.
Thanks a lot. Like I said, anytime you want me on, just let me know. I'll make it happen. I think this situation proved that I meant that, because I'm fresh off of about 20 hours of traveling. And I kept my word. I'm on here. So that's how much I enjoy being on your show. I think you're one of the best at this. And so anytime, just let me know.
My man, you're willing to do it even after all that travel. And on top of that, you're telling me to take it longer. You're a special breed, Rafael. I appreciate you.
No, you're just that good. And it's fun. So anytime.
Big thank you to Rafael for joining me all the way from Serbia. We recorded that episode yesterday before the Kings played the Nuggets in Sacramento, and it was like 11 o'clock or something like that, and he had a wild travel day, just a wild travel day of layovers and crazy connections and things like that. So to get him on and for him to be as happy and energetic here on the Locked On Kings podcast was really a treat. Just speaks to the kind of guy he is, the professional he is, the hard worker that he is. He also just recently was married back in November, and he's expecting his first kid, a son, which is fantastic. So if you want to follow Rafael for his draft knowledge and stuff like that, I encourage you to do that. But also make sure you're giving him some congratulations and sharing some love for all the great stuff happening in his life right now. And I hope you got some context and some answers to your questions there from that conversation. It will not be the last time at all that we have Rafael on, especially as we get closer to the draft itself this offseason. He will for sure be back. And now I want to hear from you, your thoughts on some of the things that he had to say. He seems to think it would be better for the Kings to try and win now versus tank for this draft class. But are there some names in this draft class that you want to hear more about, or that you're really, really interested in and you want to share your opinions on? Do that. You can do so via Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Or if you're watching on YouTube, leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Locked On Kings will return tomorrow night after the Kings take on the Nuggets again, this time in Denver. Hopefully the Kings can bounce back and get one of those wins. They can't afford to lose too many more games in a row if they want a shot at this play-in. So we'll see how that plays out. I appreciate all your support as always, and can't wait to have you join me on the next episode. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.